Greetings, scholars. Welcome to our second session of online lectures. Today we are going to continue with specific research designs under the mixed method research approach. So under the mixed method research approach, we have three types of research designs. Number one, we have what we call concurrent research design under the mixed method. The concurrent approach requires the simultaneous use of both qualitative and quantitative techniques and data collection in order to draw inferences about the matter that is being investigated. So you simultaneously use both techniques in order to arrive at a clear understanding of the problem under investigation. And for example, if you're doing a research on the influence of water quality on health, you can get the quantitative data of the content that are found in the water that you are testing compared to the standards that are required for human consumption. And then from there, you may ask people to express their qualitative impression about what they think and feel about the water that they are taking into their system. Sometimes when you find that water is turbid, looking brownish, people would ultimately say this water is dirty. So when you do laboratory analysis, you find that there's a different conclusion that is coming. Maybe the water is just fully turbid, not necessarily that it is unsuitable for human consumption. So for example, you remember way back, maybe 20, 30 years ago, during this summer season, September, October, and part of November, you find that most of the shallow wells will be very low in terms of water volume. And when you draw the water, it is looking yellowish, brownish. But people would still take it and nothing would happen. And people are thinking maybe they have a strong immune system against the dirty water. But that water was not dirty. It was just the turbidity that was high. But in terms of the chemical constituents and even the biological contents, the pathological aspect of the water, it was fine. So that's why you'd find that people drink water that is looking very turbid. But in terms of the content of bacteria, in terms of the chemical contents, the levels were within what is humanly acceptable. So you'd want to understand these two perspectives to see when people look at the water qualitatively, what do they think? And then when you go to the lab, what will be the conclusion? And then you'll be able to compare what comes out qualitatively and quantitatively. Then we have what we call transformative design under the mixed method approach. The transformative one is where you use a theoretical lens as a foundation for understanding the matter that is under investigation. So the theoretical lens that you adopt is going to guide how you collect both the qualitative and quantitative data in order to draw conclusion and to have a deeper understanding about a problem. So everything that you're doing under transformative approach, under transformative design, should first be understood from the theoretical lens that is adopted. So under this theory that you adopt, there must be specific theoretical assumptions that are going to guide your decision making and eventually interpretation of results, and finally the conclusion that you're going to draw. That is under transformative. And then we have what we call the sequential design under the mixed method approach. Sequential design is where you start perhaps with an explorative understanding of a particular problem qualitatively, and after you've gotten an impression, then you do a quantitative technique in order to now have a more broader understanding of the problem. For example, I gave you an example of water. You may ask people, what do they think about the water in a particular section of a river or a reservoir where they draw their water? They will tell you, say, this water tastes a bit salty. The animals which are supposed to be there are no longer there. And the water is not just suitable for human consumption. Okay, that gives you an impression, say, people are complaining about the saltiness of the water, or perhaps the organisms that are supposed to be found there, there's no more fishing, there are no all these invertebrates that are found in the waters, they are no longer visible. So that gives you an impression, and thereafter you want to do a very broad, deep, quantitative analysis of the waters, and to try to test maybe from the blood samples of people to say what is really transpiring vis-a-vis what you have found quantitatively in the waters and what is in the blood of the people who have tasted that water before, or who are using that water. That's going to give you an impression of what is really transpiring on the ground. You can also do it the other way around. You start with a quantitative analysis, and afterwards you ask people about what they think about the quality of the water that they are taking into their bodies. So sequential in the sense that one comes first and the other one second, to try to corroborate the validity of the results and the findings on the ground. So these are the three types of specific designs under the mixed method approach. And as I mentioned in other designs, when you are presenting your specific designs, you need to tell us what that means, how you're going to use that, and why you're going to use that specific design, and that's going to help you. After you have finished presenting your designs, you may not use all of these that I've mentioned, but you may pick one. After that section for the research approach and research design is done, the next part is where you talk about the target population. That's the next item, the next heading. What is the target population? What population are you targeting, or from which population are you going to draw the sample? So what you need to do is present that heading, and afterwards you tell us what the target population is. You may want to define, but that may be optional. You can define what it means when we say target population. So target population is basically the entire population from which you're going to draw your sample, because you're not going to interview every human being if it means you are dealing with human beings, or if it is animals, you're not going to maybe test every animal, or if it is forests, you're not going to study every forest. You may want to sample some forests. So what you do is tell us what the target population is and why you are targeting that target population. For example, in a study to understand how online learning is transforming the lives of students, you may not interview every student in the university or college, but you may just mention to say the target population will be university students. Then thereafter, you may need to decide now, using specific sampling techniques, what you are going to use in order to reduce that population to some smaller quantity that you can easily understand through your research process. So that's very important. So ensure that you tell us what your target population is, why you're going to target that population. You will not want to target a population outside the focus of your study, because you may not get the answers that you're looking for. After you have mentioned the target population and you have given the justification for adopting such a target population, you now want to decide on how you're going to sample from that target population. So after you've mentioned target population, you tell us what sample size is going to be. And the principle is that when you are using the quantitative techniques, the sample size must always be 30% of the target population. If the 30%, let's say for example there are 30,000 students, you sample 30%, that's quite very high. It's about 3,000 or somewhere there. It may not make sense for you to try to interview each and every student from the 3,000 that you have sampled. You may do another sampling of the sample. That 3,000, you get 30% of that, until you come up with a sizable number of people can provide answers to your questionnaire or to your tool of data collection. Now, one of the things that you need to remember also is that you may need to understand the nature of your study, because some studies may require even 10,000 people to participate in the research process. So it all depends about the method that you're going to use and what you want to understand. So for example, you want to get a snapshot survey of what people think about the electoral process in Zambia. You can get a countrywide sampling using what we call the Google Forms, because Google Forms, you just prepare them and you can send them in soft copy, and many people can answer that depending on how exciting the topic is and the incentive that is there for them to participate. So you find that you can get a lot of responses, and these responses are already thematized if you're using the Google Forms. So it's going to help you to quickly see the pattern that is emerging. Now, that aside, we need to be more concise and clear. So now, after you have talked about the target population, let's go to the sampling approaches and techniques. That's the next heading: sampling approaches and techniques. So under sampling, tell us what the size of the sample is going to be. That's the first thing. And then tell us which approach you're going to use to arrive at that size of the sample that you have adopted. So if you say you're going to sample 200 people, you need to have a criteria. And I think in the study that I've had, I found that actually there are criteria that I use. There's a criteria that is used in order for you to arrive at different samples, and which I'm going to share with you as a snapshot. You're going to see that I think it is coming from the work of Allen. He has determined if the target population is like this, the sample size must be like that, just like that, until you reduce it to a very sizable and manageable sample size, which you can afford to do within your budget and the nature of your topic. So after you've decided on the size of the sample, you need to tell us what sampling approach you're going to use. So when you talk about the sampling approaches, there are two types. There's what we call random or probability sampling approach, and there's what we call non-random or non-probability sampling approach. So when you talk about the random sampling approach, you're talking about an approach that allows every member of the target population to be included in the sample that you want to arrive at. If you have 50 people that you want to interview, every member in that target population, even if there are 100,000, stands equal chances of being selected. And we'll go into one by one in the next lecture that we'll be having. And there's what we call non-random sampling technique, or sampling approach, or non-probability sampling approach. In this one's basically the exact opposite of what is found in the probability sampling approach. So under non-probability sampling approach, not every member of the target population has equal chances of being selected as part of the sample size or the sample that you want to interact with in the research process. So basically, you make your own judgment as a researcher premised on the nature of the study. Based on the papers of your study, you're able to say, this one can provide better answers, that one cannot provide better answers. So I'll give you an example. You want to understand the life experiences of the university students. You will not interview first years because they are quite new in the university landscape. But you go to those who are in their final years because they have a long-lived experience from year 1, 2, 3 up to 4. They have a lot of vast experience academically, socially, mentally, how all things are done in the university. So once you target the final year students, you find that you're going to get the best answers. So you say from the final year students, that's where we're going to get the sample. So that means even if the entire population of students can be interviewed, you'd say purposively final year students can provide the best responses about a particular nature of a topic. But also, if you want to look at how students settle down in the university, you would want to ask the first years, how are they settling down now? How is their first-hand experience within the university life? Those would give you the best answers, because they want to share with you their first-hand experience and see how they are trying to seek ways of coping into the university setup. First-hand information, first years can provide better answers. But if you want to say the entire expansive lived experience within the university setup, the final year students will give you better answers. So you find that a non-probability sampling approach would work far much better when it comes to the sampling within the non-probability sampling approach. So it depends about the nature of your topic. The nature of your research will determine what sampling approach to adopt. So, but if you're dealing with quantitative research approach, you work with probability sampling. If you're dealing with a qualitative research approach, you deal with what? The non-probability sampling approach. And if it's mixed method, obviously you can mix. And there are also instances where you find that even when you're dealing with qualitative, sometimes you may apply certain techniques that are quantitative to just arrive at a particular thing that you're looking for, but it's entirely up to your reflexivity within the research process. Let's talk about the specific techniques that are found under the qualitative sampling approach, or non-probability sampling approach, or non-random sampling approach. So after you have told us the sampling approach that you're going to use is non-probability, tell us what it means and why it is the best for your study. That is not enough. Now you need to narrow down what specific sampling techniques are you going to use within the frames of non-probability sampling approach. So we have number one, what we call purposive sampling. Purposive sampling. And basically, under qualitative or under non-probability sampling approach, most of the techniques are really overlapping. They are generally purposive in nature. So you may not see or find concrete boundaries between them, or the rock solid boundaries between them or among them. They are overlapping because generally they are all purposive in nature. So we have what we call purposive sampling technique under the non-probability sampling approach. And purposive, just like the word purpose, you are going to select the participants for your study to fulfill a particular purpose of your research, because those people you're trying to select are the ones which you know are for sure going to provide the responses that will fulfill the specific purpose of your study. You not just pick anyone. So for example, I gave you the example in one of the lecture series that if you want to talk about, let's say for example, the political ecology of Zambia from independence to date, not every Jim and Jack may give you answers based on the lived experience, because if you interview a person, for example, like myself, I'll give you answers based on what I've read from the books. But if you want the first-hand lived experience, you would want to go to people like Dr. Kenneth Kaunda. He will give you a lived experience, and all others who are of his same age are the ones who can give you the best answers, because you're trying to fulfill a particular purpose. Instead of being given answers from the books or from the internet, you want people to narrate from their lived experiences, and you find that you're going to get very rich data. So purposively, you ignore all others, and you're going to pick only those who can give you very deep insight about a particular purpose of your research. And then we also we do have what we call snowball sampling. Snowball sampling is another technique that is found under the non-random sampling approach. And this snowball sampling is used where the target population is very difficult to find. I'll give you an answer on this one. What do we mean when we say population is very difficult to find? You go to a particular area, for example, within Lusaka, we have areas and compounds where youth abuse psychotropic substances. Now, you want to understand their experiences, how that is affecting their psychological life, social life, economical life. How are you going to find these people? You need to actually start using what we call snowball sampling, because it will not be easy for you to go to a particular compound and say, can I interview you? No. You need to understand who is abusing such substances. So what you need to do is for you to identify at least just one person. If you can identify 1 or 2 or 3 persons who abuse substances within the area, you can ask them at the end of the interview, do you know another person who might be abusing these substances? And of course, you need to assure them the confidentiality, anonymity, and privacy, because you will not review their names in public. They will not be able to give you the answers that you're looking for. So you identify one person, and that one person can lead you to the next, until you have what? You have gathered enough participants within your research process. I can also give you as examples. If someone from, let's say, from Namibia comes to where you are as a student, and he wants to interview only the final year students in a particular program, he can ask around, say, do you know one person in the final year who is doing such and such a program? For example, environmental education, or geography, or civic education, or environmental science. So once you manage to identify one final year student doing, for example, geography, after the interview with them on a particular topic, you may ask them, please show me other colleagues of yours who are doing geography in the final year. That person is able to direct you. So it creates a referral chain. From one person leads you to another. That second person leads you to another, until you finally comes up with what? The sample size that you're looking for, and you would have collected the data that you're looking for. That is under snowball sampling. So don't forget, snowball sampling is very useful where the target audience for your study is quite difficult to locate. And then we have what we call the convenience sampling. Just like the word itself, you are going to sample the participants based on their own convenience. Are they happy to participate? Are they free for you? Do they have enough room to accommodate you? So you consider their convenience, not your convenience, but the participants' convenience is what is very important here. Give you an example. You go to interview someone in the community, and they say, well, I'm busy. I'm busy shelling my maize, or I'm busy planting my seeds. You can't disturb me. Maybe try another time. You may politely ask them which time will be better for them. And then they will tell you, come tomorrow around 9 hours. After that, you don't have to come because I'll be busy with other things. So that convenience is what characterizes this kind of sampling. But if you follow it carefully, this convenience sampling is also purposive in nature. Because if you are targeting specific people and they say they are busy at that moment, you will not say, I'm going to another person. Because another person may not give you the answers that you're looking for. So you are better off waiting for the time that is convenient, environment that is convenient for the participants. And then you can go as a researcher to collect the information from them. And then similar to that one is what we call volunteer sampling. Volunteer sampling. So volunteer sampling is basically where you don't force anyone to participate in the process. You basically just present the nature of your study, the purpose, and what the community may benefit from that study. And then people on their own should be able to decide, say, I think I'm interested in participating in this study. Please come, we have interviews together. That is volunteer sampling. So the participants themselves will have to volunteer, and they will be free also to lead. Then there's what we call judgmental sampling technique, where you as a researcher we'll have to use personal judgment to see which person would be best to participate in the research process. I'll give you an example of our brothers from the Jehovah's Witnesses. These people have a very strong intelligence when it comes to their canvassing, when they are giving literature. You find them standing on the road or at a particular corner of the street. It's not everyone whom they are going to stop. They will look and discern, say, maybe this one may not even accept. And you find that they have a very good moral judgment, and they're able to say, my brother, my sister, excuse me, can I share with you this leaflet? Because they have seen that this person will be accommodative enough. So that judgmental sampling can also apply in scientific study when you're doing qualitative studies. There are people who may not accept your presence. No matter how persuasive you might be, they will not just accommodate you. And you need to respect that because it's ethical to do that. So, depending on the nature of your study, sometimes you may do your study in a very difficult environment, dangerous population that can cause harm to you. You need to use your judgment to see which place to go to, which place not to go to. That all depends on the nature of your study. And I think from what I'm explaining, you should also be able to see what are the limitations. Limitations may not be concrete, universal. They are context bound. So what may be a limitation in one study may be nowhere to be a limitation in another study. So as you apply these techniques, you should be able to remember the challenges that you are going to encounter. And those are the ones you're going to write as the limitation. Don't write what other scholars have written in their books as a limitation, because those limitations or advantages are basically as a result of their personal research experience. So based on your research experience, what are the advantages and the disadvantages? What are the strengths and the limitations of using, for example, judgmental sampling? That's very important. And there's also what we call accidental sampling. From the word accident, where you may end up interviewing a person you never intended to interview. For example, you're traveling in a bus and you have this interest, for example, in doing COVID-19 and how it is affecting the women folks, for example. And then you just hear somebody's talking and talking and talking, and you see that they are talking something that is related to your study. You may get closer to them, and on the bus you can discuss a number of things, and that can be part and parcel of your data collection process, and you'd have accidentally sampled that such a person. So don't forget the different types of sampling techniques that are found under the non-probability sampling approach. I have talked about the purposive sampling. I've talked about convenience sampling. I've talked about snowball sampling. I've talked about volunteer sampling, and I've talked about judgmental and even accidental. So these are some of the most commonly used types of sampling techniques under the non-probability sampling approach. So you can pick one or two depending on the nature of your study, but don't forget to tell us what it means, how you're going to use it, and why it is the best for the nature of your study. Describe that section in your research proposal and even your report, and it's going to help us to understand that you really understand why you have adopted a particular sampling approach, a particular sampling technique, and you're going to get your good marks at the end of the day. But it goes beyond marks. You have to be able to apply the knowledge that you are getting from this lecture series. So with those simple guidelines, I expect that you can be more creative. Engage me if you need to engage me, and I'll be able to provide extra resources. And I know that I have a lot of resources. Some of you already have the resources, so you can refer to the resources and be able to compare what I've explained here, what is in the resources and the modules and other content. Extra information will be provided so that you continue to read more and to explore more ideas about different techniques that are found under the non-probability sampling approach. So in the next series that you're going to have, either online or physically, I'll be talking about specific sampling techniques that are found under the random sampling approach or probability sampling approach. So please do implement what you have learned now and prepare for questions if you have any questions or discussion, and I'll be glad to assist. Thank you very much, and God bless. See you next time.